Probably the newsiest piece, and this is classic President Trump. He's completely reversed the paradigm. That's supposed to be Iran's leverage. He's like, not so fast. I'm going to do this to you so you can't get your oil out. It's their last economic lifeline. He's taking that away from them. And so that is, just as I said, a classic move. You take their advantage, you turn it into our advantage.
How significant is this news that we see hundreds of super tankers headed to the Gulf of America to try to buy oil and gas from the U.S. in Louisiana and Texas?
No, it's huge. This, again, is turning this to our advantage. This is going to be enormously profitable for us. And in 2025, under President Trump, we hit a record of oil and gas production. We're well on track to beat that this year and have even more nice, clean American oil and natural gas to sell to our partners and allies to fuel the future. And so the future is not Iran. It's going to be the United States here as one of the world's great energy exporters.
And that includes China. China will have to buy from the U.S.
Absolutely. And President Trump is going to roll into Beijing next month as really in an incredible position of strength after this 4-month period, the most consequential in modern American history between Venezuela and Iran and this energy production. So this has been just an incredible period. I think the reverse blockade is probably the newsiest piece, and this is classic President Trump. He's completely reversed the paradigm. That's supposed to be Iran's leverage. He's like, not so fast. I'm going to do this to you so you can't get your oil out. It's their last economic lifeline. He's taking that away from them. And so that is, just as I said, a classic move. You take their advantage, you turn it into our advantage.
How significant is this news that we see hundreds of super tankers headed to the Gulf of America to try to buy oil and gas?
Welcome to the Middle East US-Israel versus Iran war update with 1 week of preparations for negotiations and 21 marathon negotiations in Istanbul. Still, there's no deal between the US and the Islamic regime of Iran, and J.D. Vance, representing the US with other people, they left Islamabad and went back to the US without any deal. And that meant that there will be a resumption of airstrikes and military action against the Islamic regime of Iran back in Iran. And that is what is happening now. The US is back in action, for Israel was still in action. The US military has struck 2 more boats in the Pacific. It is currently unclear how many have been murdered in these latest attacks that is just after their downfall or not reaching a deal with the negotiation. And they let's get to do this thing because that is what we really want to do in the Middle East. For us to have a regime change, because that was the main goal. Breaking. Something major is unfolding in the Middle East as the U.S. Air Force transport aircraft are repeatedly heading there in unusual high numbers tonight, raising concerns of a possible escalation. Of course, there should be an escalation in this, and there will be an escalation in this, and we are not so sure if other countries will join in. But this is an update. We'll give you updated. We'll make you updated with all things and everything that will be happening within the Middle East. And the best way you can get these things right is to subscribe on our YouTube channel, so that as long as we put up something, you'll be able to get it. And once you subscribe, hit the notification bell, and let's continue with this one. So let's hear from this guy what he says about all these things.
Heard from the vice president, no deal on the talks with Iran over 16 hours, an absolute marathon session through the night here in the center of Islamabad. It is dawn now. When the talks began on Saturday, it was late afternoon. And we've quite literally witnessed the sun go down and then the sun come up again. And what the vice president has said is that Iran, he doesn't believe, is giving that fundamental core agreement about its nuclear aspirations. He didn't say what happens next. He didn't talk about a specific end to the ceasefire. He didn't say if it's a return to war. But what he said the United States has done is given Iran its final and best offer. The ball, it appears, is in Iran's court to come up with answers now that it hasn't been able to through this marathon session of talks. The vice president also saying that through the night he continually kept President Trump briefed and updated. He said that he'd come into these talks positive, but fundamentally, the vice president coming in looking, he hoped to get a relatively quick solution. The Iranians, with a much larger delegation and a much different negotiating style, coming into these talks with perhaps the aspiration, as they have done in the past, of talking, drilling down, getting what they wanted. Fundamentally, also, the Iranians believe that they still hold cards, that they can still control the Strait of Hormuz. And to them, that is something that is leverage, real leverage, they believe, and that it could get more than they were offered here in Islamabad.
It won't be an easy thing, an easy task for the US and Israel. And I know as the military planners, they fully understood this and they put all this into consideration that it might take some time. And I remember that is why Trump said it might take months for this war to come to an end. But again, it will not take us many months for this one to come to an end, because the Islamic regime of Iran is completely decapitated at the moment. They don't have much of air force and much of I will say naval power, unless China and Russia comes in. And the rumors that Russia is coming through within the Caspian Sea, bringing in air defense systems and most of the needed ballistic missiles. And probably China might also be coming through Russia, as they airlift most of this military hardware to Russia, and then Russia drops them to Iran through the Caspian Sea. Those are just rumors and confirmed. If they are confirmed, then it means that is why the Islamic regime of Iran has been that verge of trying to maintain themselves and not getting into action, or not getting whatever deals that the US is giving them, because they know they still have a long supply of weapons that they can use against the US and Israeli in this war. But does really Russia have a lot to use when this one Ukraine is really a headache or a thorn into the Russia's back? Because Russia is losing on the Ukrainian front. But let's not talk about that. Let's talk about the US and Israel in this. And the US has to do everything possible to make sure that they are bringing down any other offensive action that is being taken. Rumors are that the US naval ships have been able to go through the Strait of Hormuz, clearing away and clearing the mines and trying to make the way more visible and passable for other countries to come through. But I don't think that would be a very brilliant way. And if Trump doesn't really call on to other countries to come and help, will the US alone be in a position to do all these things as supposed to be done? There are people who are thinking that Iran has already won this war, but I tell you, it has not won. Neither has the US won, but the US has a higher leverage in this. If they take care, they blockade the Strait of Hormuz, then that means that the US has won, because any other country that has to pass through the Strait of Hormuz has to pray the US and remove the thing of the Chinese yuan that the RGC are using against other ships that are going through this. Controlling the Strait of Hormuz for the US will be a major win, because now all other ships from China, Russia that goes through the Strait of Hormuz will have to pay the US some good amount of money for them to go through. And remember, 90% of the oil that China is using passes through the Strait of Hormuz. So that's a very great win to President Donald Trump. And remember, I said he wants to make America great again. And making a country great again, it involves you invading other countries and stealing their resources. And this is what the US is currently doing. They went to Venezuela, stole the Venezuelan oil, as some other people say, but that was a much greater thing happening in Venezuela than what we were told, than what we can see. Leave us a comment in the comment section and tell us what you think about all that we've just said. Do you think the US is in control and it will win this war, or do you think Iran has already won this war? It is Middle East War Updates with Alan Hoy with IKTV.